Hey guys, weightlifting doc here. I was asked to perform an analysis between a Sledgehammer and the Mace's sold by White Lion Athletics. While this is not their Sledgehammer, it's very similar, but this is one of their Maces. And so what you see, the first thing you want to talk about really quickly is the length of the head. So for rotational movements, it's always going to be optimal to use a round head. It just passes through the body, more easily, as well as the fact that this longer head, if you turn it sideways, you're good, but you have to be careful because if you turn it the other way, it's much easier for you to hit yourself. It has to be much further away from the body, so it kind of pulls you away from your core and center of gravity. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, the lengths are different. So the length of the Sledgehammer is 36 inches. The length of this Mace is 41.5 inches. Okay, the length of the Sledgehammer head is about 3.2 inches, and the head here is 4.5 inches. What does that all translate into? Well, let's do this. Let's go through several movements and then talk about some of the components. So first, we'll talk about a 360. Let's see what a 360 looks like. Okay, stay nice and tight to the body. If you want to pause, you can. Stay nice and tight to the body. And we move in a rotational 360, right? Well, what's important for rotational movements is going to be centripetal force. Centripetal force is the force that is required for me to pull or keep that mace from flying out into space, okay? And keep it moving in an arc. So, the centripetal force of the mace compared to the club, when I did the measurements and the calculations, again, these are calculations, so we do make a few estimates, but the comparisons are very, very close. So I can give you the exact number, it might be off of the exact force or torque, but in comparison to each other, they become very accurate. And the centripetal force generated by the Mace compared to the Sledgehammer was almost 26%. It was actually 25.5%. And so that 25.5% increase, what does that mean? It sounds good. Wow, I'm working 25.5% harder. Essentially, you kind of are, but how does that translate if we take that to force, and how does that translate to pounds lifted? Well, Mace movements, 360s, these are usually high rep movements. If I do 100 repetitions, here's what it translates to doing the Mace compared to the Sledgehammer. You lift 360 more kilograms, which is 794 more pounds, lifting the Mace. Now, that's not total pounds lifted, that's how many more pounds you would lift in 100 repetitions, okay? Now, if we talk about torque, the calculation, I'll show you what we're going to use torque for here in a second, but the calculation was 25.8%, so it was almost 26% again, okay, increased in the Mace versus the Sledgehammer here. So let's look at it. When's it important? Well, I like to calculate torque when I do a 10 to 2, okay? So you can even go all the way up to 11 to 1 and make it a 300, okay? But I generally do 10 to 2s. And so with the 10 to 2, the important point is boom, right there, boom, right there. Those are the important points, okay? The stopping points, the 10 and the 2, because that's where the torque takes over as I stop, and torque of the Mace, not my torque, the torque of the Mace, I can calculate with gravity, and of course, the weight of the Mace, and of course, using the radius here. So what happens is, I wind up with a whole lot more torque for the Mace in comparison to using the Sledgehammer. Again, these are all based on, okay, yes, it is 2 pounds heavier. I forgot to say that. The Sledgehammer is 20 pounds. The Mace is 10 kilograms, which is 22 pounds. So it is 2 pounds heavier, so you're going to get an increase regardless, but you're not going to get this exponential increase unless you have that change in length. And so again, the Mace being a lot longer, you're getting a lot more centripetal force, you're getting a lot more torque. Let's look at one more thing. I want to look at lever forces, okay? What's lever forces? And I'll show you exactly where I grabbed it to calculate. Okay, I got a pretty comfortable grip here. And so the force of this guy right here, as I press it, okay, this is a 22-pound Mace, or 10 kilograms. If I were to press 10-kilogram dumbbell, a lot easier, okay? But the fact that I'm pressing a levered implement with this longer moment arm, this long radius, it changes it exponentially. So What does it translate to? Well, in this case, the lever forces, if I'm using the sledgehammer versus the mace generates 28%, or you need to generate 28% more force to move the mace, okay? How does that translate into numbers? Well, let's say I do 100 repetitions. I do 10 sets of 10. Okay, it's quite a few, but a lot of us do some high volume. If I do 10 sets of 10, that's an additional 270 kilograms, or 595 pounds of weight lifted. So again, what you're doing when you're using, in general, when you're using a levered implement, is you're working a lot harder and getting a lot more bang for your buck. But the longer the implement, the more you're going to get out of it. So these are some comparisons between the mace and the sledgehammer. Hopefully that makes some sense. Hopefully you can quantify that a little bit in your brain. If you have any questions, let me know. Stay strong. White Line Athletics.